Coming up on the NESN Patriots podcast, Bill O'Brien is back running the Pats offense, but wouldn't comment on whether Mac Jones will be his starting quarterback. Jerod Mayo wants to be a head coach in the NFL, but will that opportunity come in New England? And with the NFL draft just a week away, what will the Patriots do with the number 14 pick? Hello and welcome back to the NESN Patriots podcast. First time in quite a while that we've had an episode of the NESN Patriots podcast. Since that last episode, my co-host Dakota Randall has been gallivanting around Europe. Just got back a day or two ago. Dakota, how you doing? How you adjusting back to U.S. life?
I'm good. Yeah, I thought I was going to be pretty jet lagged and cooked when I got back on Sunday, but it turns out the far more difficult thing to power through is late playoff games in New England with Celtics and Bruins now, which is great. But, it ends up being late nights. You finish the game, you consume the post-game coverage. I usually go to bed at like 9:30. Now I'm going to bed at midnight. So I'm dragging a little bit, but it's a fun time of year for sports, to be sure.
Yeah. I mean, we may have to keep that up for the next month and a half, 2 months if things go the way everybody hopes around here. But you were launched right back into Patriots coverage upon your return. Yesterday, Tuesday, was the Patriots pre-draft media availability day. We'll get all into a full kind of draft preview later on in this episode, but I think it makes sense to start with just some general reactions from what we heard yesterday from both Patriots Director of Player Personnel, Matt Groh, and even more interestingly, from the Patriots assistant coaches, because this is the first time that we were able to speak with Bill O'Brien, with Adrian Clem, with Will Lawing, and with all of the returning members from the Patriots coaching staff other than head coach Bill Belichick. So obviously the headliner there was Bill O'Brien, who's taking over the Patriots offense this year. And he really seemed to come into that media availability with a clear theme and a clear message. And that was clean slate. He said clean slate about 5 or 6 times in the 10 or 12 minutes that we spoke with him down at Gillette Stadium. It really seems like he's emphasizing put 2022 in the past, the struggles that the Patriots had last year, any of the kind of behind the scenes difficulties the Patriots had, put those in the past and move forward with, again, a quote unquote clean slate coming in here in 2023. Just what was your general reaction to hearing what O'Brien had to say yesterday?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think the day as a whole was served though as a good reminder that for as leaky as the Patriots have been, not just this offseason, but in recent years with all these rumors and that swirl around the team and all this drama and all this stuff that gets leaked behind the scenes and anonymously, that when you actually talk to them in person, it is still very much the same operation. Not a lot of the coaches had very much to say. Some of them were straight up and just said, I really don't have anything to tell you today. So, that was as expected. As far as O'Brien, I thought the most interesting thing was that he sort of, made it clear that this whole thing of not saying Mac Jones is the franchise quarterback is just going to be a thing. Probably fairly so. I mean, I think we can all agree that he hasn't necessarily proven anything one way or the other over the first 2 seasons. And Bill Belichick at every turn, at every chance to be given, to sort of stand by Mac Jones and endorse him as the starter, has sort of said, well, everybody's going to get a chance, or he's good enough to play in this league. Like, he hasn't stood by him one way or the other. And Bill O'Brien sort of spoke in similar terms. So I think this is just going to be a thing, this sort of narrative where Mac Jones hasn't been anointed anything. We'll see if that changes once minicamp comes around, and once training camp comes around. But for now, the quarterback competition between Bailey Zappe and Mac Jones, is going to at least be a storyline, because no one around the Patriots will, say one way or the other if Mac Jones is the starter. And then also what you said about the clean slate comments, I think, that was interesting just because, I think it was an acknowledgement that last year was such a train wreck, so to speak, that really everybody deserves a clean slate this year. Wipe the board, start fresh, and let's sort of build this thing up, because last year really did need to be torn down.
Yeah, an interesting quote from O'Brien too was he really downplayed the storyline that he and Mac Jones have kind of a prior relationship coming in here, because they did overlap briefly for a couple of months at Alabama after O'Brien took that job as offensive coordinator. Mac Jones is still there training for the draft. And he basically said, he made it sound like they kind of had one conversation and that was about it. He was like, yeah, I met him. He like gave me some particulars of the offense and really that was all. So I don't know if it kind of seemed like the overall general vibe of this was kind of downplaying, trying not to pump Mac Jones up in any way, really. Somebody also asked him directly, because it had been reported that the opportunity to work with Jones was part of the reason that Bill O'Brien was excited to come here. He also basically shot that down as well. He used like, oh no, like I was here before, my family's from here. He kind of pointed to a lot of different other factors. I don't know if that's all just part of the general message that we've heard from the Patriots over these last couple of months of just really doing everything possible to not hype up Mac Jones in any way. It wasn't that he came in and was like, no, I'm not really feeling this guy. It wasn't anything negative, but it was just interesting that there wasn't really any acknowledgement of being looking forward to working with Mac Jones.
Yeah. And, you know, the questions kind of put it on a platter for him to be just to say something, even if he doesn't mean it, you know, like, yeah, I met with him. You could really see it then that, you know, how smart he was, how well he sees the game, going over this stuff. Like you could just see that he had what it took to succeed in the NFL, and sort of rave about the intangibles and all this stuff. Like it just was sort of a layup opportunity to do something like that. And he didn't do it, you know, and I think, again, it seems like, you know, right or wrong, a lot of people sort of want the Patriots to treat Mac Jones like Tom Brady, where like there's no debate. Like, yeah, you know, Mac Jones is our franchise quarterback. Yeah, like you see it. He has all these great qualities. You could see it from, you know, when he was in college, and now like he's just he's the guy. And because that was the way they would talk about Tom Brady for 20 years, there was never really any sort of question. But that's just not the case with Mac Jones, nor should it be, again, because, you know, good rookie year, bad second season for, you know, all the excuses we can make for him. And so the Patriots just aren't taking the bait on those. They're sort of just playing it down the middle. And, you know, on the one hand, I think that's the right thing to do, and that's what they should be doing. On the other hand, it is going to feed this narrative that Jones' job isn't safe. So this is going to remain a storyline for so long as this is sort of the tone that they project.
Yeah, regardless of how the Patriots view this thing behind the scenes, which none of us really know, if the public narrative continues to be what it has been, then yeah, that is going to be probably the leading number one storyline going into OTAs and potentially training camp on this entire team. If it's still the case where whenever we speak to Bill Belichick next, he still kind of continues that same message of, you know, every job's up for grabs, like including quarterback. No, there's no kind of, if he stays on that track, then yeah, we're going to have to view it as a legitimate quarterback competition, even if potentially behind the scenes, the Patriots kind of have Mac Jones at a certain level and Bailey Zappe at a certain level. But yeah, it's obviously going to be pretty fascinating and potentially infuriating, depending on how these whole next couple of months play out.
Well, just on that point too, like I remember last season after the Bears game, you know, and I think even leading into the Bears game, you and I had both talked about like this thing could get ugly. Like if Mac Jones struggles, he could get booed. We could get the Bailey Zappe chance. And obviously that happened like big time. And then for the rest of the season, every home game, you were always, every time there was a bad Mac Jones drive or an interception, you were like, you know, perking your ears up, seeing if you could hear Bailey Zappe chants. And while they never were nearly as loud as they were in that Bears game, they did crop up like every time through the rest of the season. And regardless of how this thing goes in training camp, if Mac Jones wins the job and then goes out in whatever the first game at Gillette Stadium is and has a bad first drive, I would bet my house that there's going to be some boos and there's going to be some sort of Bailey Zappe chance until he just totally ends this discussion. And to your point, that's either infuriating or just annoying, because I think this has grown to be an incredibly tiresome storyline, from the Zappe angle to the does Bill Belichick hate Mac Jones or is he mad at Mac Jones and all this stuff. It's just it's a real story, but it's also very tiresome and annoying to some extent.
Yeah. And if Twitter replies are any indication, which is a dangerous road to go down, there are still a significant portion of the Patriots fan base that still believes Bailey Zappe should be the starting quarterback over Mac Jones. And as you said, those will only intensify at the first sign of any kind of Mac Jones struggles. So
the Zappadons.
Before the Patriots actually get onto the field, and we can see how that potential competition takes shape. But yeah, certainly not much settled on that front. Also interesting, switching gears to the other side of the ball. This was the first time we had heard from Jerod Mayo since his contract extension that kept him in New England and will keep him in New England for at least, quote, the next few years, according to Mayo. He still didn't say what his exact title will be. We don't know whether there's going to be some sort of assistant head coach involved, whether he's just going to continue going ahead as the linebackers coach. He did say that on the field, it doesn't sound like his responsibilities will change a great deal, or I should say in game, it doesn't sound like his responsibilities will change. Steve Belichick will continue to call the defensive plays as he has for the past couple of seasons, but Mayo has been taking on a more prominent role behind the scenes with the Patriots. He was in the interviews for the offensive coordinator job. He was in the interviews for the offensive line coach job. He said he hopes to be in the Patriots draft room next week. And he's also doing some sort of unspecified management development type training, classes and whatnot. Basically, he was talking about how the Patriots are sort of putting him on a good track to eventually become a head coach one day. He wouldn't say whether that will happen in New England, but between his comments yesterday and Robert Kraft's comments at the owners' meetings a couple of weeks back, it does seem like Jerod Mayo is the overwhelming leader in the clubhouse to be Bill Belichick's successor whenever it is that Bill Belichick decides to stop coaching.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway from hearing Mayo talk, was just that he has very much been given the sort of Josh McDaniels like next in line treatment, where he's interviewing or helping out with interviews for coaches, involved with all these sort of other managerial things. And a few months back, a couple months back when we started to hear about this, I wondered if it was, I think there's a difference between being like the anointed like heir apparent, like, no, you will, when Bill is done, you have the job, and basically them saying like, hey, Bill's 72 now. You never know what can happen at any point. We need someone to be able to, take over if need be. And I think like Josh McDaniels sort of had that role for a while. And, if nothing else, it seems like Mayo has that, even though with Joe Judge being the assistant head coach or whatever, that maybe that's actually his title. But regardless, after hearing Robert Kraft at the owners' meetings talk about Mayo, it sure seems like he wants him to be the next head coach of the Patriots, which, we talk about Mac Jones a lot, but just as interesting is Bill Belichick's job status this year. If the Patriots go 8-9 again, I think all bets are off. And that's going to be quite interesting, but that's obviously a long way from now. But yeah, just hearing Mayo talk, he clearly wants to be a head coach. That much has been obvious for a while. And he's sort of being groomed to be one, whether it be here or somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a podcast since that Robert Kraft media scrum at the owners' meetings. He really did kind of throw down the gauntlet to Bill Belichick during that chat with reporters, basically saying it was a lot of the similar kind of talking points that he had last year in that same setting, basically saying he's tired of this team not playing in the playoffs and winning playoff games. But you really got the vibe out of this one that if that doesn't happen this year, then there could actually be some kind of seismic changes on the level of Bill Belichick potentially not having that job anymore. And I think I'm personally pretty optimistic that the Patriots can at least get back to being a playoff team this year. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender at this point, but I think they should be better and should at least kind of show that level of progress. And if say they get a wild card spot, win one playoff game, lose in the divisional round, I think that's good enough to kind of give Bill Belichick the leeway that he needs to break Don Shula's record. But yeah, as you mentioned, if this is a sub 500 team again with a more kind of accomplished and experienced coaching staff in place now, then yeah, I think you could see some significant franchise shaking changes, which makes this obviously a massively important year for Bill Belichick's legacy and job status and whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this is I don't know if a make or break year is too heavy of a phrase, but yeah, it's monumentally important that the Patriots get back to at least being in the mix for playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, I think the Patriots now are a better team than they were 2 years ago when they went, whatever it was, 10-7 and made the playoffs. From a talent standpoint, really across the board, I think they are a better team, which sort of underscores the failures of all the coaching decisions last year, that it looked so much worse. So I think they certainly have it within them to be 10-7, if not better this year and in the playoffs, but they also look to have a really difficult schedule. Now, I mean, we don't know what that schedule looks like. We only know the opponents, and you never want to, start predicting games in April, because who knows, injuries, we all thought the Broncos were going to be great and they were terrible. So who really knows how this thing is going to pan out? But just on paper right now, it looks like they have a very difficult schedule. So you wonder if the Patriots go out there, look clearly better during games, but nevertheless finish 8-9 or maybe one game better than that and miss the playoffs. Is that enough to appease Kraft, or does it need to be significantly better from a record standpoint and in the playoffs for Belichick to keep his job? So it's certainly going to be interesting.
Yeah, to that point, I saw a study, I believe it was last week, from Warren Sharp, that based on Vegas projected win totals, the Patriots have the hardest schedule in the NFL by a pretty significant margin this coming season. Now, obviously, that can change. Teams underperform, teams overperform, but it does seem like they're going to have a pretty difficult road here once the season begins in a couple of months. Couple final smaller nuggets from this coaching chat we had yesterday. Joe Judge confirmed is going to be working with the special teams this season. That was reported a couple of weeks ago. It sounds like it'll also be he'll also have his hand in a couple of other areas, but that sounds like that should be his kind of main area of focus, which makes sense given his background. Will Lawing, one of the new Patriots assistants, will be working with the tight ends. That was also expected since the Patriots no longer have Nick Caley. DeMarcus Covington, the Patriots D-line coach, he's still sticking in his same role, but he does say he wants to be a defensive coordinator within the next few years. He had a couple of interviews with teams this offseason in Arizona and the Chargers. And you chatted with Adrian Clem for a little while. I wasn't in that at all. What did you take away from him? Yeah,
just another example of, it's been reported that he'll coach offensive line and the running backs, but the Patriots never announce an actual job title. So we've just been, every time we talk about him, we have to say reportedly or expected to coach offensive line. And then you talk to him and all he talks about is coaching the offensive line. So he's clearly the offensive line coach, and
I'm very excited to coach the offensive line, but I cannot confirm that I will be coaching the offensive line.
Right. And he very much looks like a former NFL offensive lineman. He is huge in person. But yeah, he was about what you'd expect from a first-year Patriots coach. Toed the line, didn't say a whole lot, sort of said what everybody else said, which was, we just got in here yesterday. We're starting fresh. We're sort of building up and getting to know guys right now. But, he had some good things to say about Cole Strange. Didn't have too much to say about the personnel beyond that. Talked a little bit about whether the Patriots will stick with that sort of outside zone running scheme that they showed last year before dialing it back. Kind of went into it, but just didn't give any details because how could he? But yeah, in his own words, he essentially confirmed that he's the offensive line coach. But which is interesting because I do wonder if Billy Yates is going to stay the assistant. I would expect that, even though, he basically seemed to be the de facto primary offensive line coach last season. So you wonder if the Patriots don't really ever do like the lead position coach and the assistant position coach. Maybe Clem and Yates just both are called offensive line coach. But either way, that's clearly where he's going to be.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten official titles on most of these guys. I feel like they usually will release the actual coaching staff around the start of OTAs, which is late next month. Players just returned Monday for the offseason program, but it'll still be quite a while before we get to see them out on the field. And before that happens, we have obviously a major milestone in the NFL offseason, and that's the NFL draft. As we're recording right now on Wednesday, it is 8 days from now. It begins Thursday, April 27th, and runs through the 29th. Obviously, this is the Patriots enter this draft with some significant perceived needs, and they have the highest draft pick if they choose to keep it, which obviously with the Patriots is no guarantee, but their 14th overall pick, if they do take it, would be the highest that they've drafted a player since 2008 when they got Jerod Mayo at 10th overall. There are a number of ways the Patriots can go with this top selection. I think the top three that everybody kind of looks at as their most prominent needs: offensive tackle, cornerback, wide receiver, and then you could throw in a couple wild cards in there. They've spent a lot of time with some of the top edge rushers in this draft. There was a report out there that they could surprise a lot of people and take a running back. There may be a safety in there. I think I would doubt that, but it looks like offensive tackle, cornerback, and wide receiver are kind of the big three for this team based on both what their roster currently looks like and the projected players available there. So what's your overall view of this number one pick as the Patriots are coming in now that we've kind of dialed into to the whole draft prep machine?
Yeah, I really don't know what to think. Like I at different points this offseason, I've said it's got to be an offensive tackle. Like it has to be, then you start thinking if the really high end ones are gone by then, it would be so like the Patriots to trade down to like 20, get a tackle there and get more picks later on. I also think cornerback is still a huge need, even with re-signing Jonathan Jones and Jack Jones and Marcus Jones, both showing potential. Especially if someone, who knows what they think of these guys, but it seems like Devin Witherspoon is kind of the clear-cut top prospect. If someone like him slips to 14 based on the other team's needs, if I'm the Patriots, I would do that. It doesn't seem like using the 14th pick to draft a receiver, even if it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, would be a wise use of that asset. Maybe they feel differently, but I also think, I think tight end is a sneaky huge need in this draft. I don't know if it would require or if it would, make sense to use the number 14th pick on that. But it's considered one of the best tight end classes in a long time. So I'm sure there will be great players available in the second or third rounds. But with Hunter Henry hitting free agency next year and Mike Gesicki hitting free agency, and Mike Gesicki not even really a tight end, the Patriots can't afford to find themselves in the same position that they did when Rob Gronkowski retired, where it was the not Larry Izzo. What's Larry?
Ryan Izzo.
Ryan Izzo.
Matt Lacoste. Yeah, I think Ben Watson was there that year. Yeah, it was a lean couple of years at the tight end position.
Yeah, like that obviously cannot happen again. So unless they have plans to trade or sign someone again, I think it would be smart for them to draft a real true tight end prospect. And so there's some mock drafts have them doing it at 14. So it wouldn't surprise me. But I still think at the end of the day, like they got to come out of that first round with either a franchise tackle, be it at number 14 or be it later, or a cornerback for me. Those are the two that I would prioritize.
Yeah, it was interesting too, trying to parse some of Matt Grove's comments yesterday on this draft class. Most of them were reasonably boilerplate, but it was interesting just to hear him emphasize how important that first round pick is. He said the Patriots, quote, can't miss on that pick. You're drafting that high. The Patriots haven't drafted that high again in 15 years. You're able to get a caliber of player that isn't typically available to the Patriots in the draft. And they need to make sure that player can become quickly an impact player for them. I look back at their recent first round picks before Mac Jones and Cole Strange over a 6-year period from 2014 to 2019. They drafted 5 players in the first round. They only picked up the 5th-year option on one of them, and that was Isaiah Wynn, which they probably ended up regretting because he had a pretty terrible fifth year and currently is still unsigned more than a month into free agency. The other players on that list: Dominique Easley, N'Keal Harry, Sony Michel, and who's the one that I'm missing there? I'm missing one from there. Dominique Easley, Sony Michel, Malcolm Brown, who was a solid player, but the Patriots didn't end up picking up his fifth-year option. So just listening to the way, the kind of player that Groh was describing that the Patriots want at that spot is just the kind of player that they haven't really got in the first round in quite a while. Now it's too early to draw those final conclusions on Mac Jones and on Cole Strange, especially given the whole coaching setup last year that we've talked about so much. But yeah, the Patriots need to get an impact guy in that spot. And it was also interesting to hear Groh talk about when you draft a player in the first round, you basically expect him to come in and play right away. So, and looking back at that as well, most of the draft picks that the Patriots have had, the first round draft picks that they've had since 2008, have been basically immediate starters. Almost all of them have started at least 12 games in their rookie season. I think Easley was the only one who didn't start more than half of the games he played in as a rookie. So just something to keep in mind if maybe some of these first round guys are viewed as not developmental prospects because you don't have a first round guy who's developmental. But when you're saying, all right, maybe this guy can come in and play for a season or sit for a year behind Trent Brown or Riley Reif or whoever, and then step up in year two, doesn't really seem like that's the way that the Patriots view the first round. So if you're getting a tackle at 14 or even a tackle at 20 or 21 after a trade down, sounds like they're going to be hoping that that guy can come in and start right away.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, this isn't a hot take. Like they need to get, and they've done a good job of this last 2 years. They need to get like multiple foundational pieces in this draft, and they need to start or continue creating quality depth through the draft because, this could change at any point with extensions between now and next offseason. But one thing that I've noticed recently that is pretty interesting is the Patriots have 28 players set to hit free agency next offseason. Now that includes some restricted free agents and some practice squad guys, but Hunter Henry, Devontae Parker, Bourne, Trent Brown, Kyle Duggar, Josh Uche, Juwan Bentley, and Fernie Jennings, Gesicki, Jalen Mills, Mike Nwenu. Down the line, I mean, McMillan, Mac Wilson, Carl Davis, and then another 21 more set to hit free agency the following offseason in 2025, including Matt Judon, Dietrich Wise, Devon Godchow, David Andrews, Jonathan Jones, Adrian Phillips, Christian Barmore, Montre Stevenson. Like those are a lot of players who aren't locked up for long-term deals. And so a lot of that obviously can change with extensions, but you're not going to be able to keep all of those guys. So it just puts more pressure on the Patriots to continue drafting well. And also just makes me wonder, like, what's coming a year from now? I'd have to go back and look and see, like, at this point in each of the last 10 off seasons, how many projected free agents did the Patriots have? I don't even know how you'd go about figuring that out. So, but that feels like a high number to me. 28 players only locked up for one more season. And so it just makes me wonder, is everything really being put on this year? And that there really just are no guarantees beyond the season, be it for Mac Jones, be it for a lot of these players that are going to hit free agency, be it for Bill Belichick. We talk about a clean slate. It could be a real clean slate next offseason, but it's just a lot of guys, vast majority of the players will hit free agency by 2025.
Yeah. And interesting in that group too, is the 2020 draft class, which is kind of the shift for the Patriots. They had basically 2017 or so through 2019, just really poor drafting, sapped the entire roster of that kind of young, cheap, controllable talent, and really forced them to go out and make that free agent spending spree that they had a couple of years ago. The real key pieces from that class are now up for extensions and are going into the final year of their rookie contracts. And that's Kyle Duggar, Michael Nwenu, and then Josh Uche, who you have to now put on that kind of that level after the year that he had this past year. Going to be very interesting if the Patriots try to be proactive and potentially lock up any of those players this offseason before the season begins, because players going into that final rookie contract year are eligible for contract extensions. We haven't seen any of that so far from the Patriots, but when you're talking about, and Robert Kraft has talked about it multiple times, that's the way he wants to build the team, by drafting guys, keeping them and developing them. And that's what we saw for years and years from the Patriots, with the majority of the core of those Super Bowl rosters was players that they drafted and then held on to and were able to kind of groom into those franchise cornerstone types. So, we're going to have to see if they feel that strongly about a player like Kyle Duggar or a player like Michael Wenu, that they go out and try to say, hey, let's get this done now. We want you to be here for the foreseeable future, and not worry about any of them having an even better season than they've already had and kind of pricing themselves out next offseason.
Well, yeah, and then you wonder too if there are players that they identify as, we don't really care how good you play this season. Like, we're not going to pay you what you're probably going to get in free agency. And do they trade those players? Like, I don't think right now they would trade Josh Uche, but you just wonder if they look at it and say, if you go out and get 12 more sacks next season, someone's going to give you way too much money in free agency, and that team probably won't be us. And so then you'd say, like, the smart thing would be to trade him, but you're also a better team this season if Josh Uche is on the roster. So there's just a lot of interesting personnel decisions coming up for them.
Yeah. And I think the tight ends conversation that you touched on earlier is an important one for the Patriots this year, because as you mentioned, they don't have anybody signed beyond this season. And they really only have one kind of true, like, traditional tight end on their roster in Hunter Henry. And even Henry is more of a pass catcher than he is a blocker. So going into this year, I would be stunned if the Patriots come out of this draft without at least one tight end, just based on, one, what their roster looks like, and two, how deep that group is. Some of the prominent draft experts out there, the Mel Kipers and the Todd McShays and the Daniel Jeremiahs, have said that they see 10, 11, 12 starting caliber tight ends in this year's draft. And oftentimes you go into a draft and say, maybe three of these tight ends could turn into kind of mid-level starters. And it seems like this year it's just completely flush with talent. And you could potentially even wait until late day 2, early day 3, and get a guy who might be going in the first or second round another year, just based on how deep that group is. So I agree that that's a sneaky need for the Patriots, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they approach that, because there's really two potential schools. You could say, all right, we like having the kind of player that a Mike Gesicki can provide, that sort of move matchup tight end. Maybe go out and get another one who can kind of be groomed under Gesicki for a year and then take that over potentially in 2024. Or you can say, all right, we've got two capable and talented receiving tight ends. Neither of them is an especially good blocker, because Gesicki especially isn't much of a blocker at all. Maybe go out and get a guy who's a little bit more skilled in that area, even if he doesn't quite have that same pass catching prowess, kind of round out that room a little bit. But yeah, I think there's a good chance that they can come out of this draft with a tight end that can be really an impact player for them for a long time.
Yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if we come out of training camp and Matt Sokol's on the 53-man roster. Like, that would be something that they would do.
Would not be overly surprising. I think, was it Sokol and Scotty Washington, who is also essentially a wide receiver, are their only other two tight ends behind Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. So yeah, I think I don't know if it's underrated anymore, because I think a lot of people are talking about that as a need, but that's certainly you wouldn't want the Patriots to go into the season probably with the current tight end situation that they have right now.
But I also would say that, with Hunter Henry, it's been kind of amazing that for a guy who battled injuries all throughout his career, I don't think he's missed a game with the Patriots.
Yep. Good point. Yeah.
Which has been, amazing. However, I think you still have to look at that and go, well, one, anybody could get hurt at any time, but especially if Hunter Henry gets hurt, then we're in a situation where Mike Gesicki has to block, which is not a good situation. So yeah, or Matt Sokol or Scotty Washington, which I don't think you could feel great about either. So I think you have to get a true, legitimate, tight end option along, behind Hunter Henry, because Mike Gesicki really, as you said, isn't really that. And so I agree. I think you got to do that through the draft, and if there's any year to do it, it's this one. And it's, I think it's something they could accomplish, and even something like the 4th round. So yeah, I'd be stunned if they come out of the draft without a tight end.
Going to be interesting as well to see how they approach the running back position. Because as I mentioned earlier, there was a report from Jeff Howe over at The Athletic that the Patriots are exploring adding, quote, another blue chip running back. And Jeff reported that they are absolutely intrigued by Bijan Robinson, who is widely expected to be a first-round pick and is viewed as the clear number one guy at that position. You never know what to take from these reports during pre-draft season. It's the height of kind of smokescreen season. And I think there would be a lot of people who would be rightfully angry if the Patriots drafted a running back in the first round. But I do think it makes sense for them to draft a running back at some point and potentially in round 2, 3, 4, just based on what they have on the roster right now. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson is that clear top guy. But there's really not much certainty with anybody behind him there. James Robinson, they signed during the offseason. He didn't look like the same player coming off of a torn Achilles. They're hoping that he can obviously sort of return to the level of play he had as a rookie in Jacksonville. And then we still don't know what the Patriots have in Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris, the draft picks from last year. They didn't do much of anything offensively as rookies. And then Ty Montgomery is back, but he missed all of last season or almost all of last season with an injury. So I would not be shocked if you see the Patriots go get Jahmyr Gibbs in the second round, who played under Bill O'Brien last year, or draft a running back higher than some people might expect. I don't think they should do it in the first round, but
or trade for Dalvin Cook.
They could get Dalvin Cook. I saw their odds they're like the third or fourth highest odds to get Dalvin Cook.
But I didn't know that. Yeah. The thing is, though, and same thing with the DeAndre Hopkins thing. There's now like these sort of increasing rumors that those guys could be released. And if those guys get released, like I don't see them going to the Patriots. So if the Patriots want someone like that, they're probably going to have to swing a trade. But we'll see.
Any other draft related thoughts, random thoughts as we close out here?
No, I mean, I do think that it'll be interesting to see if they take a quarterback, and if so, when. We talked about all those upcoming free agents. One player we didn't talk about is Mac Jones, because if you look online, he's slated to hit free agency in 2026, but that's only if the 5th-year option is exercised. And so the Patriots a year from now will have to decide on his 5th-round option, and that's going to be a fascinating storyline. It can stop being a storyline pretty quickly if Mac Jones plays so well that it becomes an obvious decision to pick that up. But, outside of that, like, he'd have to play really well this year for, I think, the Patriots to be like, yeah, we're going to lock in for around $30 million for you. So who knows what's going to happen. And then if maybe they decide we'd rather try and negotiate a contract with you that more accurately, reflects your value, then exercising the 5th-year option. And then you get into, how does Mac Jones currently feel about being with the Patriots, given all that's gone on, right down to that Bears game we talked about. So, it's a year from now, but it's going to be, very, very interesting to see what ends up happening with that 5th-year option.
Yeah. Also, Anthony Richardson ends up sliding toward the Patriots in the first round. That, I don't think I would do that, but that is going to be very, very interesting if he starts to get into that range after the Patriots met with him at the combine and showed some interest in him earlier. And obviously, if the Patriots draft a quarterback in the first round, that would create even more chaos in the whole Mac Jones situation.
At this point, I'm expecting the chaos, because that's all that really has surrounded this team for the last few years. Right down to getting Cam Newton, or letting Tom Brady leave, getting Cam Newton and sticking with Cam Newton when he was playing terribly. So I'm expecting the weird from this team at some point. So we'll see. Yeah, drafting Anthony Richardson seems ludicrous to me, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me.
And I think that will do it for this week's NESN Patriots podcast. Again, the draft starts next Thursday, April 27th, with day 1, and then day 2 is Friday. Day 3 is Saturday. We will be back with another episode the following week to recap all of the Patriots additions and potential trades and potential departures and everything they do during draft weekend. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter at Zach Cox NESN. You can follow Dakota at Dak Randall NESN. And you can follow all of our Patriots pre-draft, in-draft, post-draft, off-season coverage over at NESN.com.
All right, I'm going to send you guys a tease. Either one of you can read it if you would like. I'm still recording.